Hello YouTubers! I will be going through this week's games, review last week's tips and leaderboard of our footy tip comp, and also go through my Brownlow Votes for season 2025. My Brownlow Votes after round 19 are in top spot with 32 votes. We have N. Dacos, Collingwood, who had 3-3 possession and a goal against Fremantle. In joint second spot with 26 votes are B. Smith, Geelong, and C. Sarong, Fremantle. And in fourth spot with 24 votes we have N. Anderson, Gold Coast. And to round out the top 5 in fifth spot with 22 votes we have Tom Green of GWS Giants. These are my top 5 of the 2025 Brownlow Votes after round 19. My round 19 tips I got were 3 incorrect. I selected the D's to beat the Blues, upset, and West Coast I took a gamble, but Richmond had a magnificent away win against the West Coast Eagles out of the stand, and I selected Collingwood, Fremantle, what a magnificent 1-point win against Collingwood at the MCG. Therefore, for round 19, I selected 6 out of 9 games correct. Let's see the leaderboard of the Talking Effing AFL footy tips. In top spot, we've got 2 players tied on 110 tips, and they are me, Talking Effing AFL, and Potter 1. In third spot with 109 tips is Patrick L. 32. And to round out the top 4 on 108 votes, we have I Am Hags. These are the top 4 of the Talking Effing AFL footy tips for season 2025 after the current round 19. Before we continue, I would like to ask for a very small favour. If you enjoy this AFL content, please take a sec to subscribe to the channel and like the video. That would be awesome. Okay, let's return back to the show. The first game of the week is between Hawthorn against Carlton on a Thursday night at the MCG. The players injured for the Hawks are Will Day, Moreira and Weddle. For the Blues, a lot of players out that are missing are Camporelli, Cottrell, Fantasia, Kemp, McGovern, Newman, Smith, Walsh, Lewis Young, and Francis Evans you can add to the list. The players in the mix for the Hawks are Ramsden, McKenzie, and CJ. For the Blues, their players in the mix are Boyd, Akers, and O'Keefe. Where the game will be won at, it's the ruck midfield setup of the 2 respective sides. For the Blues, you got Picknock in ruck with the midfields of Sarah, Shearer, Cripps, Akers, and Carroll. For the Hawks, you got Mick in ruck with the midfields of Nico, Ward, Nash, Morris, and D'Ambrosio. Looking at that setup, I like the Hawthorns and ruck midfield setup. You got Mick. He's a good tap ruckman and he'll provide first advantage to the midfields of Nico, Ward, and Nash. And therefore, I believe the Hawks will have more inside 50s compared to Carlton, where they got the forwards of your Gunston and the Wizard Watson and Ginneran. And I'm going to tip the Hawks to beat the Blues in a close one by 11 points. The second game of the week, played on a Friday night, is between Essendon Bombers and the Western Bulldogs. The players injured for the Bombers are Bryan, Caldwell, Cox, Draper, Edwards, Hayes, Jones, Langford, Martin, Mackay, Setterfield. So many players out. For the Doggies, they'll be missing Gallagher, Artie Jones, Treloar, and Waitman. The players in the mix for the Bombers are Caddy, Davies, Lindsay, and El Harvey. For the Doggies, their players in the mix are Clearly, Jones, and McNeil. Where the game will be won at, it's just Essendon's list. So many players injured. They've got so many first year players playing. Your Kako, your Angus Clark, Luau, and you even got second year player Nate Kelly playing. Just unfortunate with so many injuries, testing out the depth of the Bombers. The Doggies are a good side. They got a great midfielder. English, LeBon, Liver, Richards. Good set of midfielders. I expect the Bulldogs to beat Essendon by 35 points. The next game, also played on a Friday night, is the Battle of the Bridge between GWS Giants against Sydney Swans at ENGIE Stadium at Western Sydney. The players injured for the Giants are Angro, Daniels, Dickerson, Hannaford, Stone, Ward and Woodinas. For the Swans, they'll be missing Adams, Amati, Edwards, Fox, McDonald and Papali. The players in the mix for the Giants are Hogan, Kelly, great players, and also gun defender Sam Taylor and Link. For the Swans, their players in the mix are Florent, Bowman and Francis. Where the game will be won at, it's the ruck midfield set of the two respective sides. For the Giants, you've got Briggs and Ruck with the midfields of Finn Callahan, Green, and the midfields of O'Halloran, McMullen and Angwin. For the Swans, you've got Grundy and Ruck with the midfields of Heaney, Gordon, Warner, Lloyd and Roberts. Just looking at that, the Swans got class players in the midfield and I expect them to get more inside 50s. However, they don't have the forwards where you got players like McDonald, Papali and Amadi all injured. And even though Sydney will have more inside 50s for their magnificent midfielders, I don't expect the Swans to convert. And if the Giants can even in that midfield where they got some gun players in Tom Green and Callahan, I believe that their forwards of your Hogans, your Cadmans for the Giants will kick a lot of goals. And I want to tip the Giants to win at home by 25 points in the Battle of the Bridge. The next game, played on a Saturday lunchtime, is a Q clash between Gold Coast Suns and the Brisbane Lions. The players injured for the Suns are Ballard, Graham, Himmelberg, Noble, Miller and now Rioli. For the Lions, they'll be missing Ainsworth, McCarthy and Payne. The players in the mix for the Suns are Sexton, Moore and Roses Jr. For the Lions, their players in the mix are Day, McKenna, Joyce and Bailey. What a big in. Where the game will be won at, it's the ruck midfield set of the two sides. For the Suns, you have Vitz in ruck with the midfields of Rao, Anderson, Humphrey, Fiorini and Closely. For the Lions, you have McInerney in ruck with the midfields of Dunkley, Neal, McCluggage, Berry and Bailey. Just look at the Lions midfield. They got so much class. Dunkley, Neal, premiership players, gun players. And then you can also rotate Ashcroft and other players like Loman or Rayner. The Lions just got so much depth in the midfield where they will give a lot of inside 50s to their forwards of your Camerons, your Hitwoods, Morris. And I expect the Lions to beat the Suns by 28 points. The next game, played on a Saturday afternoon, is the Western Derby between Fremantle Dockers and West Coast Eagles. The players injured for the Dockers are Jones, Pearce and Riddle. For the Eagles, they'll be missing Allen, Warman, Yo, Graham. The players in the mix for the Dockers are Walker, Erasmus and Dudley. For the Eagles, their players in the mix are Hunt, Champion and Brock. What can I say? Where the game will be won at? Fremantle. Got so many good players playing, whereas West Coast Eagles are rebuilding a young side. How's this young midfield of your high mid go against your Sarong, Brayshaw and Wayden Young? Gun elite midfielders and Fremantle got good forwards. Tracy, Amos I should say, and Wass, who kicked 6 goals against Collingwood last week. And you got Shea Bolton and Frederick as your small, medium forwards. The Dockers got so much class, West Coast are young and rebuilding. I expect Fremantle to beat the Eagles by 55 points. The next game, played on the Saturday night, is between North Melbourne and Geelong Cats. The players injured for the Roos are Archer, Bergman, Core, Larkey, Tucker and Xeri to suspension. For the Cats, they were missing Duncan, Guthrie, Hawthorn and Kordatsky. The players in the mix for the Roos are Derswa, Marley and Hansen. For the Cats, their players in the mix are Stevens, Henry and Nero. Where the game will be won at, it's where the two rosters are or lists are. North Melbourne got so many youngsters playing in their team. So many kids playing. Finlay Sullivan, Rechercha, Sheasel. They've got so many high-end talent, but they're still young. They've only played their 40 to 60 games. Whereas Geelong, experienced side, won the premiership a couple of years ago. A very mature side. Got great forwards in Jeremy Cameron, and you have young Stengel up forward. They're just primed to win or primed to make a tilt at another premiership. The Cats compared to North, still part of the rebuilding process. And I expect Geelong to easily beat the Kangaroos by 38 points. The next game, played on a Saturday night, it's a showdown between the LA Crows and Port Adelaide Power. The players injured for the Crows are Butts, Rochelle and Hinge. For the Power, they were missing Burton, Cochrane, Horne-Francis, Marshall, Moss, Power Pepper, Regalia, Vicentini and Walsh. The players in the mix for the Crows are Bond, Nankervis, Burgess and Brodie Smith. For the Power, their players in the mix are Rosie, Rioli, Atkins and McIntyre. Where the game will be won at, it's a Crows forward line. If you look at the Crows forward line, you got Keys, Fearful, Taylor, Walker, Fogarty, Rankin, and in defense for the Power, you got Jones, Burgoyne, Sin, Farrell, Alir, and Zertfatcher. Just look at the Power's defense. They've got two key defense in Zertfatcher and Alir, but they don't have a third tall. And the Crows play the three talls over your Fearful, Fogarty, and Walker. And there'll be a mismatch where you might have like Walker on Farrell or Lachlan Jones, and that's going to be like a 10-15 centimeter height difference. And if the Crows can isolate whoever's on Jones in the goal square, they've got a great opportunity to score a massive bag. And because of the Crows full line, too much power, too much scoring power, I expect the Crows to hit 95 plus points again, where I expect them to kick over 90 odd points against Cowboys, and they did last week. I'm going to tip the Crows to beat the Power in the showdown by 8 points. Still going to be a close one. The next game, played on the Sunday, is between Richmond Tigers and Collingwood. The players injured for the Tigers are Brewer, Clark, Clinier, Dow, Forsyth, Gray, Larlaw, Lafu, Lynch to suspension, McCorvus, Rousmith, Ryan, Smiley. The list just goes on. For the Maggies, they were missing DeGoey, Harrison, Howe, Jow, McRae, McInnes, Ryan, and Charlie West. The players in the mix for the Tigers are Bolter, Blight, Green, and Smith. For the Maggies, their players in the mix are Mitchell, Parker, and Steele. Where the game will be won at, it's where the two rosters are. Richmond, second year of the rebuild, so many young players playing that were taken last year's draft, i.e. the Tom Sims, the Jonty Full, and also Hawthorn, who was very good against West Coast Eagles last week. Even though the Tigers had a good win against West Coast Eagles last week, they're a young, developing, rebuilding side, whereas Collingwood, they're in premiership mode, they're top of the table, one of the oldest rosters in the league, they're primed to have a tilt for flag this year, and due to the inexperience that Richmond's got and all the injuries, and Collingwood got so many class players, your Dacos brothers, Pendlebury, Sidebottom, Craner, they've got so many elite players. And given that Collingwood lost to Fremantle at home last week, they've lost 4 in a row, I don't expect them to lose 3 in a row. And I want to tip Collingwood to beat Richmond by 22 points. The last game, played on Sunday afternoon, is between St Kilda Saints and Melbourne Demons at Marvel Stadium. The players injured for the Saints are Butler, Carroll, Howell, Keeler, King, Philippou and Webster. For the D's, they were missing Hoare, Lever, McAdam, Woods Wakefield and May. Where the game will be won at, it's the ruck midfield setup of the two respective sides. For the Demons, you got Gordon ruck against Marshall of Saints. I just give the advantage to Gordon, but in midfield for Melbourne, you got Oliver, Rivers, Petrarca, Langford and Chandler against St Kilda's midfielders of McRae and Steele, with Henry, Hill and Wood on the two respective wings. You compare the midfielders in the centre of McRae and Steele for the Saints, hard inside mids, against Oliver and Rivers, who can both extract the ball and run a bit with the ball. I just give the advantage to those two Melbourne midfielders. And then on the other side, you got Petrarca with Chandler and Langford against Henry, Wood and Hill. I expect Petrarca to dominate against Henry, and then it'll be a good contest between Chandler and Wood on the one side of the wing and Langford and Hill. Say that's even, I just give the advantage to Melbourne's midfield, and I expect the D's get a lot of inside 50, where you got Van Rooyen, Cosy Pickett and Bailey Fritz to kick goals. And I'll say Melbourne in a low scoring game where they only kick 12 goals, and the D's to win by 11 points. My round 20 tips are the Hawks to win on the Thursday night, the Doggies to beat Essendon on a Friday night, plus the Giants. And on Saturday, I expect the Lions, the Dockers, the Cats, and the Crows to win their games. And on Sunday, the two away sides of Collingwood and Melbourne to win their away games. Thank you for watching my video, and it will be appreciated if you can subscribe and comment to my videos. Hopefully you enjoyed my video, and see you next time. Cheers or bye.